In Venezuela, the National Assembly approved the draft organic law for the defense of the Guayana Esequiba during the second discussion. Brazilian President Lula da Silva presented on Thursday the Life Black Youth Plan, which seeks to support the country's black youth and address the social injustices faced by this sector. And in Sudan, around 200,000 children could die of malnutrition due to the war that started last year, according to estimations. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, the National Assembly approved the draft organic law for the defense of the Guayana Esequiba during the second discussion. During the session, deputies highlighted the content of the legal document that claims the sovereign defense of the Venezuelan territory. During his presentation, Deputy Diosdado Cabello explained the journey that involved the territorial defense and the controversy with the arbitration award and a popular consultation. Cabello emphasized that the approval of the defense law by Guayana Esequiba complies with the mandate dictated by the people last December 8th in a consultative referendum.
As of January 9, the approval of the first articles began. It was a very broad consultation throughout the national territory. All states of Venezuela participated for a total of more than 200 consultations throughout the country. Opinions, observations, and recommendations were gathered from the different sectors. A law that I believe complies perfectly with the spirit approved by the sovereign people in the referendum on the issue of the Guayana Esequiba, which I would like to remind you, had 5 questions.
For his part, the President of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Jorge Rodriguez, assured that the organic law is already submitted to the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice.
We declare approved the organic law for the defense of the Guayana Esequiba. It is submitted to the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice so that it should rule on the constitutionality of its organic nature in accordance with the provision of Article 203 of the Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We kept our promise with the people of Venezuela, who came out massively to say yes 5 times on December 3rd, 2023. We kept our promise with the Venezuelan people.
In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro received Cuban Prime Minister Manuel Marrero Cruz at the Miraflores Palace. The visit of the Prime Minister of Cuba, Manuel Marrero Cruz, was carried out with the objective of strengthening ties of friendship and brotherhood and at the same time reaffirming the cooperation agenda between both countries. During his stay in Venezuela, the Cuban Premier will hold meetings with several authorities of the country with the purpose of evaluating the integral agreement between the two nations. Likewise, both governments will evaluate the challenges of the coming years and will deepen the current policy. In Paraguay, indigenous people and women will lead the 30th Indigenous and Popular March in the capital city of Asunción of March 20th and the 21st, 2024. The National Farmer Federation has called this march under the slogan for land and production against all injustices. Among the demands of the protesters are the concern that the lack of concrete actions on issues affecting the agricultural production sector. The demonstrations will start as farmers and indigenous people will settle in the headquarters of the former Metropolitan Seminary as a meeting point. On Thursday night, the protest will be taken from the streets to the front of the National Congress. Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva presented a plan with racial equality policies in the administrative district of Ceilândia to improve the living conditions of the black population in the country. The head of state presented the Living Black Youth initiative promoted mainly by the Ministry of Racial Equality and the General Secretariat of the Presidency. The document presented lists 43 goals and 217 concrete measures agreed with the different ministries to reduce the lethality and vulnerability that plague the young black population. During his speech, the Brazilian head of state urged young blacks to work for their dreams and to fight for their convictions without forgetting their roots and their families. And from Cuba, the ex-account of the Presidency of the Republic announced the birth of a new space for communication, which will be hosted by President Miguel Díaz-Canel to address the country's news and issues. From the Presidency is the name given to the YouTube channel, and in its first episode, the head of state commented on the events of last Sunday, March 17th, when citizens from some localities of the country took to the streets to protest against the long blackouts and delays in the delivery of the standard family basket. Far right-wing news media and U.S. politicians took advantage of these events to motivate a social outbreak on the island. Alongside the Minister of Energy, Vicente de la O Levy, Díaz-Canel analyzed the current energy situation in the country and the prospects for a short and medium-term solution. Precisely, the Cuban leader, in his first program on the digital platform YouTube, reiterated that his government involves the Cuban people in every decision taken.
The decisions that are taken in Cuba are made considering the opinion of the population, the analysis of the population. The most complex processes in our country are submitted to popular debate. Right now, we are starting with the priorities that we have set for this year. We are in 4 discussion processes that began with the party militancy and that are going to include the population and the communities on the importance of strengthening unity based on the statements and the call by the General of the Army in his speech for the 65th anniversary of the triumph of the revolution in Santiago de Cuba, on the economic measures announced by Prime Minister Marrero at the National Assembly of the People's Power, and which have already begun to be applied with other methodology we have proposed, with other philosophy, when the conditions are created, when the compensation measures are in place for those who may be most affected.
The Cuban president also stressed that behind the alleged demonstrations of March 17th, there is an orchestrated operation from the United States that seeks to destabilize order in the nation.
We're not naive. Here there was also an operation of unconventional warfare, and they applied the same script they always apply, and the script was predetermined. They focused on peaceful demonstrations. After the peaceful demonstration, they begin to talk about police repression, about political prisoners. After the political prisoners, they begin to say that there is ungovernability and that it is a failed state. And after that, they begin to talk about a change of government. All a falsehood, a whole setup, a whole conspiracy that responds to the manuals of unconventional warfare.
On the other hand, Díaz-Canel assured that only a socialist system such as the one that exists in Cuba has the commitment to solve the problems of the people.
The enemy wants to see us in confrontation. The enemy is not interested in solving Cuba's problems. If the enemy were to intervene in Cuba and take over Cuba, which they could never do, and we know why, and that's Maceo's phrase, they would not solve the problems of electricity, nor would they solve food problems, because the logic of capital does not solve these types of problems.
In this context, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel visited Thursday several communities and places of economic interest in the eastern provinces of Guantánamo and Santiago de Cuba. Hundreds of people lined in the streets of the communities to give a warm and massive welcome to the Cuban president, who stopped to shake hands and talk with its residents. Last Sunday, some localities of the area were the focus of demonstrations due to power cuts and instability in the distribution of the basic food basket. The president's tour began on Thursday morning and included also productive centers where he encouraged its workers to do their best and remain united in defense of the homeland. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. On Thursday in Palestine, dozens of Palestinians were killed and injured by Israeli occupation troops, mostly women and children. Precisely for the fourth consecutive day, the occupying forces carried out a fierce operation in the Al-Rimal neighborhood and inside the Al-Shifa medical complex. In this sense, United Nations Secretary General expressed his concern for the severe situation and reiterated that attacking hospitals is a war crime. In the meantime, health authorities confirmed more than 100,000 Palestinian victims among the total number of dead and wounded. In the meantime, Herzi Halevi, chief of the General Staff of Israel, admitted the operation carried out in Al-Shifa hospital complex. In this regard, he explained the aim was to put pressure on Hamas, despite Gazans denounced a fierce bombardment on civil population within the health facility just in the middle of the holy month of Ramadan. In turn, the Zionist military avoided mentioning civilian casualties, citing only that 15 Hamas members died during the attack. It should be noted that in November, Israel and the U.S. claimed to have evidence that the hospital was under Hamas command, but they never proved it. According to official sources, the latest death toll stands at 32,360 Palestinians since the Zionist attacks began on October 7th. In this regard, the occupation army killed more than 13,000 children and 8,400 women, while wounded more than 74,096 people. On the other hand, the World Health Organization noted that about 360,000 residential units have been destroyed or damaged, in addition to 392 educational facilities, and only 12 of 35 hospitals are partially functioning. It must be noted that statistics say that on average, every hour in Gaza, 15 people are killed and 6 of them are children. 35 people are wounded, 42 bombs are dropped, and 12 buildings are destroyed. The head of the U.S. diplomacy, Antony Blinken, is in Saudi Arabia, and from there he announced on Thursday that his country submitted a draft resolution for an immediate ceasefire linked to the release of hostages to the United Nations Security Council. From Qatar, where he began his Middle East tour, he landed in Riyadh. There he met the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is also Prime Minister, and his Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Faisal bin Farhan. Along the way, the Secretary of State expressed optimism about the approaching ceasefire. The proposal must be put out to vote, assured the head of diplomacy at a press conference. This is the first one Washington has produced because all the previous ones were rejected. On Thursday, authorities in Israel announced that the port of Eilat is on the verge of closing, as they also stated the dismissal of half of its workers, claiming that attacks by Yemeni rebel forces have left them near to shutting down operations. The announcement of the possible closure of one of the most important Israeli ports in northern Israel comes despite cooperation with Western forces seeking to confront the Houthi attacks. It is worth noting that Eilat is at the northern end of the Red Sea and has been one of the most affected by attacks by Yemeni forces in support of the Palestinian cause and against the Israeli genocide in Gaza. International Day of Forest is celebrated on March 21st, a day dedicated to raising awareness upon the importance of protecting these invaluable natural resources. This day was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in 2012 as part of a global commitment to the sustainable management, conservation, and development of all types of forests to ensure their survival. The choice of marking March 21st as World Forest Day coincides with the vernal equinox in the northern hemisphere and the autumnal equinox in the southern hemisphere, symbolizing natural charge, rebirth, and renewal. Likewise, every March 21st is a global awareness day of Down syndrome, which has been officially observed by the United Nations since 2012. Down syndrome exists in all regions of the world, is caused by extra genetic material on chromosome 21, and has varying effects on learning styles, physical characteristics, or health. Adequate access to healthcare, early intervention programs, and inclusive education, as well as appropriate research, are essential for the growth and development of the individual. For World Down Syndrome Day 2024, we call for people around the world to end the stereotypes. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Sudan, the war started last year. It is estimated to result in around 200,000 children dead of malnutrition in the upcoming weeks, one of the worst humanitarian disasters in recent times. The country, which has already experienced the largest internal displacement crisis in the world, with 6.5 million people on pilgrimage within the territory, is experiencing a situation of acute food insecurity. The war that began almost a year ago between the current government and the head of the paramilitary forces has left thousands dead and wounded and 18 million people facing severe food insecurity. Edem Wasornu, director of the operations for the United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs, told the Security Council that a situation was a nightmare. Attorney Barry Pollack, who belongs to the legal team representing WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, said Wednesday that his legal team sees no signs of resolving U.S. charges against Assange following the publication of a Wall Street Journal report on exploring a guilty plea. The journal reported that the U.S. Justice Department is considering whether to allow Assange to plead guilty to a reduced charge of mishandling classified information. A Justice Department spokesman declined to comment on the report. The Wall Street Journal said that in recent months, Justice Department officials and Assange's legal team have had preliminary talks about a plea deal, but that the discussions remain uncertain and the talks could fall apart. Assange is fighting extradition from Britain to the U.S. In Portugal, President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa confirmed Luis Montenegro as Prime Minister. The announcement is a result of the round of hearings with political parties and coalitions that presented to the elections, also strengthening the decision and the recognition of Pedro Nuno, leader of the Socialist Party, that he will be the head of the opposition, as confirmed by the presidential office. The president received hours earlier the right and center-right coalitions that supported the candidacy of Luis Montenegro, who have presented a sketch of the composition of the government. Now we move on to the world of sports. In Guatemala, the long-distance running athlete Luis Grijalva returned to this country after 23 years in the United States to apply to compete in Paris with the blue and white colors that represent the Central American nation. In this sense, the runner arrived in the country accompanied by his parents to complete the procedure that will grant him a permit to participate with the colors of his nation of origin in the Olympic Games of Paris 2024. 2024, where he has already qualified. Grijalva is considered one of Guatemala's best athletes in history and will compete in the 5,000-meter race. Before finishing, we would like to highlight that today is the World Poetry Day, which commemorates one of humanity's most precious forms of linguistic expression and identity. Poetry, practiced in all cultures and regions of the world, tells us of love, romance, heroism, our common nature, and shared values. UNESCO first proclaimed March 21st as World Poetry Day at its 30th General Conference in Paris 1999 to support linguistic diversity through poetic expression and promote the visibility of endangered languages. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.